Welcome to the GemLab video tutorials, where I'm going to give you some basic step-by-step guidance on the ins and outs of video editing so you can get started or get a refresher on something when you need it. This time we're going to look at the Editing Workspace, its additional tools, as well as the timeline more in depth. This tutorial is meant to follow tutorial 2, where we used the Assembly Workspace to create a basic timeline, as this layout is what I would suggest that you move to, given its focus on the tools you'll need to refine your editing. Now we're going to go over a lot of tools in this video, so as opposed to tutorial 2, I would suggest that you watch this through, acquaint yourself with the tools, and then come back for refreshers when you need them, rather than following along as you edit. Here we'll put up time codes for the various different tools covered in this video so you can get back to them if you need to. To start off, you'll notice that editing has far more docked windows than Assembly had. In the top left we have the source viewer, but also docked into it we have the effects controls as well as other windows. In the bottom left we have the project window, but also docked into it are effects, history, and other windows as well. You can do almost any task from the Edit Workspace, but just remember you have to switch between these tabs on the left side to find the right tools. We're going to return to a tool we've already used, the Program Viewer, starting with Playback Resolution. This dropdown is a big help if your timeline is getting more complicated, if your hard drives are slow, or if your computer just isn't quite cutting it. This can be lowered from full to 1/2 or 1/4 or less depending on your system. This will allow you to lower the visual fidelity of the viewer while playing back footage, but in return it will speed up the responsiveness and may solve dropped frame or stuttering issues you may have when playing back footage. Moving down, we'll discuss some timeline tools we didn't touch on last time. First of all, you have Select All to the right, which is found here or using the A key on your keyboard. This allows you to, as its name suggests, select and move everything to the right of the thing that you click on your timeline. This is very useful when you have to move large sections of your edit to make space for new sections. For example, you could realize you need to put a montage between two sections of your edit, and instead of having to shift click every single file or lasso all of them and hope you didn't miss any, you can just use this tool. Then we have the rolling edit, which is hidden underneath the tool Ripple Edit. Click and hold Ripple Edit to reveal it. This tool will allow you to roll both sides of an edit back and forth. This is useful when two clips are right next to each other because rather than trimming one clip back and then the other clip forward, it allows you to do it in just one motion. The last tool from the palette that I'll highlight right now is Slip. Slip is really useful when you have a clip already in your edit and you don't want to change its length or its position in the edit itself, but you need it to start a little bit earlier or end a little bit later. So it allows you to click on a clip and drag it left or right to change where it begins or ends without moving it. This is really great when your edits are already pretty well developed and you don't want to be dragging things out of place, but you just need a couple frames here or there to get better results. Now we're going to move to focusing on the much more boring but extremely important controls on the timeline window itself, as you will need to know these in order to properly control its behavior when doing more precision work. Starting on the left-hand side, we have the track controls. We start with lock, which is pretty self-explanatory. It locks you from being able to select anything on a given track. This can be really useful when you have background music and perhaps you've looped it and you don't want it getting messed up when you use Select All to the right, for instance. Do note that it may affect the sync of your clips if you have locked off your audio but are moving the video that corresponds to it. Then we have the active track controls. These are mostly used in conjunction with either the insert command or copy and pasting. When using either of these features, your clips will show up on the timeline where you put your playhead, but also on the lowest active video track or the highest available audio track. So, if you have both V1 and V2 selected in blue here, and you paste, it will paste onto V1 because V1 was the lowest. If you turn off V1 but leave V2 active and paste again, it will land on the V2 track. This is very important in making sure that you don't accidentally overwrite other parts of your edit when you're just trying to copy paste something in. Then there's sync lock, which you can pretty much leave alone. And lastly, visibility for video and mute and solo for audio. Visibility works like any other Adobe program. It will hide that layer of your video. Note that this carries over to exporting as well, however. If something is hidden, it will not be exported. Mute turns off the relevant audio track, so basically visibility for audio. Solo, on the other hand, mutes every track other than the ones that are soloed. So if you've really built up your audio edit and you've got sound effects on a track, music on another track, ambience on another track, and you just want to work on your dialogue, solo is what you go to. It's much easier than muting all the other tracks. At the very end, you have voiceover record. This allows you to record your voiceover directly to the timeline, and it's actually what I use to record these tutorials. The setup for that will depend on your equipment, microphone, etc., so we'll pass over that for now. The last important thing that you can do with the track control section of the timeline is to adjust the height of your tracks. This is very important because by expanding the track, you will be able to see the keyframe line, which is very useful for various effects, and on audio, it will expand your waveform, which can make it easier to edit. You can see the keyframe line here as represented by this white line. On audio, this keyframe line by default changes the volume of a clip, which is a necessary tool when evening out volume. To change this for an entire clip, you can click and drag the line up or down using your regular cursor tool. In order to do more precision work, you would use the pen tool, but we're going to save that for a later video on effects. On the video line, by default, this controls opacity, but this can be changed for a variety of other tools. There are two major ways to change the height of your track so that you can access the keyframe line. The first is to put your cursor over a given track in the track controls part of the timeline, hold Alt and use your scroll wheel to freely expand a track as high as you want or retract it as much as you want. If you hold Shift, you can then do that for all the tracks at the same time. The other method allows you to quickly toggle a track between the default collapsed view and a medium view. In order to do this, double-click on an empty part of the track controls panel. It will toggle whatever track you are over to collapsed or medium. If you hold Shift while doing this, it will expand or contract all of the tracks. Using these timeline tools and track controls, you can really start to refine your cuts, build more complex montages in Premiere. The last tool we'll discuss for this purpose in this tutorial are transitions. Transitions are effects that go on the cuts of your video. The most common version of this is a fade in, a fade out, or a crossfade for either video or audio. Different kinds of transitions can be found in the effects window in the bottom left under audio transitions or video transitions. To use the default transitions, which are crossfades, you can just right click on the edge of a clip or the edit point between two clips and select Apply Default Transition. This will apply the default transition for its default duration. The duration can be changed in the timeline menu of Premiere's preferences. The transition will appear as a yellow overlay on the edge of the clip, or going over both clips, and its duration and position can be changed using your cursor. You will have to zoom in order to do so, so place your mouse over the area you want to zoom in on, hold Alt and use the mouse wheel in order to do so. In general, for a fade in or a fade out or a crossfade that you want to be noticed but also appear smooth, you want the minimum length to be 1 second or longer. This gives the video or audio enough time to properly transition without seeming too jarring to the audience. The exception to this is when you're doing dialogue editing or you're just polishing your audio in general. In these cases, you'll typically be working with very short transitions, 8 or less frames. The purpose of these very short fades is to keep the audio from popping when it meets each other on an edit, or to keep minor shifts in background audio from being so noticeable that they affect the audience. So it can be useful to go into the menus and change that default length in order to keep from having to constantly shrink your audio transitions every time you apply them. Your goal with these timeline tools, track controls, and basic transitions is to get the timing of your edit down and to make the overall viewing experience smoother so it's easier for both you and others to evaluate the work rather than focusing on major technical issues. This way you can work out how long your shots and sequences will be, you can see if the rhythm of your edit works, and you can work your way through the rough cut stage. I strongly suggest that as you do this, you keep versioning your sequences, duplicating them and renaming them as you go through making major changes, so you have the option of reverting to the older versions if you need to. And that's all there is for this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful, if not a little overwhelming, and that you come back if you need a little refresher. If you did find this helpful, maybe hit the like button or subscribe if you want to keep following the rest of these tutorials. Good luck with your rough cuts.